11 days to the Super Bowl. We are counting down here. It is going to be on CBS there. Our home, by the way, if you make it out to Vegas, is going to be on the Bellagio fountain. Over,
we're going to be on
under,
the fountain?
On the fountain. I would like to throw you in. I think we could do that maybe like Friday or something.
I can't swim.
Okay, first of all, you can.
It's not deep.
Brady Quinn, speaking of rankings, all-time quarterback rankings, his top 5 there. Patrick Mahomes, who we're going to see next upcoming weekend. I'm a week ahead of myself. Followed by Dan Marino, Aaron Rodgers, and coming in at number 1 and 2, Tom Brady, followed up by
You went in an interesting order there.
Joe Montana.
You went 3, 4, 5, 1, 2.
Okay, well... I hate y'all.
And away we go on HQ.
Away we go here on HQ. Brady, let's start with Patrick Mahomes. They're coming in at number 3.
How about I start with some initial thoughts on the list? All right. For me, after Patrick Mahomes, I think 4, 5, and whoever you put in that order, it becomes extremely difficult. I mean, Peyton Manning's not in that order. I've struggled with that. John Elway, struggled with that, not putting him in there. The late, great Johnny Unitas, who I was not alive for, but Roger Staubach, so many other quarterbacks you could put in that list. Now, I think it's fairly simple when you look at Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Patrick Mahomes. Based on what Mahomes has done so far, 1, 2, 3 was somewhat easy for me. It was really the next 2. And I couldn't come on the CBS Sports HQ and be with Pete Prisco and not put Danny Marino on the list. So, of course, Dan Marino, the most talented passer, or arguably the most talented passer, with Aaron Rodgers, who I think would also be in that category of the most talented passer we've seen.
Dan Marino's the greatest passer of all time. There's no question about that. Your list makes sense by winning Super Bowls. I get it. I understand it. I would have had a tough time. You know, when you look at some of the guys you left off, where does John Elway rank? You know.
Okay, but let me put it this way: how many first-team All-Pros does John Elway have?
What do you have? 2?
None.
No?
Really? 3 second-team All-Pros. So as I kind of started to go through the list, the Super Bowls mattered and they didn't. And then you kind of look at some of the individual accolades, and I think that started to factor in a little bit there too. So again, it's not to take away from anything that they're able to accomplish. It's just the fact that when I look at those passers, I sit there and say to myself, yeah, it's tough to keep John Elway off, but someone has to stay off. And Dan Marino is the one that made it on. Aaron Rodgers right after that is a 4-time MVP.
By the way, I didn't see Johnny Unitas in his prime either, but you could easily make a case for him being on this list as
No
well.
doubt.
That's an
Would
easy
you
one.
change his list, though?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I probably would. Patrick Mahomes, number 3 already. I mean, he's moving there.
Okay, well, hold on. Well, we'll get to the next question.
Yeah, I mean, he's moving there. I mean, if he wins this one, I think you can make a case for it. But again,
we've never seen a quarterback do what he's done in his first 6 years starting.
Rodgers.
So make the case for Mahomes. Let's go to there.
What about Rodgers on the list? You think Rodgers?
He's a 4-time MVP. He's also won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I don't know if I would put Rodgers on the list.
Okay, so if you don't have Rodgers on the list, you think Mahomes is too high, who would you put ahead of Mahomes on Brady's list?
Well, Johnny Unitas would be on my list, so I know that's one. Clearly.
And again, one I contemplated, but again, not during my era of being alive and all that, but one I looked at heavily.
How about Otto Graham?
Now, I did not see Otto Graham, so I can't put Otto Graham on there.
You didn't see Johnny Unitas either, right?
I saw him at the tail end of it, but a lot of people would put Otto Graham on that list as well.
Where would you put Mahomes then? Because Brady has him as
He'd
the
be in the top 5,
and
after if he wins this week, then he might be number 3. But if he doesn't win this week, maybe he's not.
I was just saying, he's a 2-time MVP, 2-time Super Bowl MVPs, 1, 2. He's been as good as anyone, I think, since they've come into the league. For that reason, I'm kind of looking at what he's done here and now, but also what he's going to continue to do, I think, down the rest of the road. And probably not this Sunday, but next Sunday, especially if he gets that win.
I mean, I think it's pretty easy to get a group of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, even if you count Unitas and Graham, and then start going from there. But narrowing it down to the top 5, a lot of people wouldn't put Marino in the top 5.
Because he didn't win it. Yeah.
Well, that's because of the Super Bowl accolades, though. But I think when you look at him as an individual player, there's no quarterback out there who wouldn't sit there and say Dan Marino wasn't arguably the best ever to do it as far as his individual talent and ability. And same with Aaron Rodgers, for that matter.
I'd probably put Peyton Manning ahead of Aaron Rodgers.
Okay. And honestly, like, as I sent the list, and our producer Jack can probably attest to this, I said Peyton Manning's just right there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are going to say, well, he won 2 Super Bowls. Well, the difference is, you know, again, that team he was on, the Denver Broncos. Remember, he was banged up that year. Brock Osweiler helped him to get them into the playoffs. The Sheriff took over after that, but that was largely a defensive led.
But the year before, when they lost to Seattle in the Super Bowl, he also threw for, what, 50 touchdown passes for Denver and got him there. So, I mean, I would probably put Peyton Manning ahead of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and that's easily, you can easily say that. That was what I tussled with, honestly.
So Mahomes right behind Joe Montana in Brady's list. He's already equaled Montana in MVP awards. If he wins another Super Bowl MVP, he would equal him there. And if he wins next week, he'll be within 1 ring of Joe Montana. If he does that next week, Would you move him ahead of Montana already?
No.
So he's staying at 3 no matter what?
He's staying at 3 no matter what. To me, this is kind of me foreshadowing what I think is going to happen here, not this Sunday, but next Sunday. I think he's going to win 2. And then I think you start making the case for him in that span. He's going to have the same number. And you start to look at the career and everything else that he's going to be able to accomplish from here on out. But I think it's got to be 2 in order to surpass Montana.
If he wins 2,
you're saying win 2 more.
Two more Super Bowls, he's ahead of Montana.
Right.
Because in this era, it's a lot tougher to do, too. I mean, it really is. So I would, to answer that question, I would say 100%. If he wins 2, he's going ahead of Montana.
What about Travis Kelce? Where do we put him with tight ends? I mean, since George Kittle has entered the league, Kelce has still stayed above him in all of the ranks. But then you got guys like Gronk out there.
I think you're talking about the top of the top when you talk about Travis Kelce. Like, you're talking about the Rob Gronkowski, Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez. Like, at least in my more
John
modern
Mackey,
history.
Ozzie Newsome.
Now, he can go back further, but I'm saying since the start of the new millennium, I would say those are the 4 that you're kind of jockeying for and looking at as far as statistically speaking, what they've been able to accomplish so far. But again, if they win this one, you already look at his postseason stats. He's already surpassed Jerry Rice there. It's hard not to argue that you wouldn't put him up there at the very top of the list when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and when you talk about the new age tight ends and you talk about guys in this era, he's right there pushing Gronkowski. I still think Gronkowski was the best because he could do so many. You know, he was like a tackle blocking too. Kelce's not quite the blocker that Gronkowski was. So I think Gronkowski was a better overall tight end. His career was a lot shorter. That hurts him a little bit as well. But you're talking about the all-time great. They're both all-time great tight ends. I mean, when you look at the history of that position,
all of them.
Gates, Gonzalez. You go back, John Mackey. I mentioned him back when he played. Ozzie Newsome, Kellen Winslow. I mean, Kellen Winslow Sr. would have been phenomenal in this era catching passes. He was back then. So there's been some great tight ends, but he's in the conversation as the greatest of all time.
You know, Jason Witten in there as far as productivity up too. Played for a long time, put up a lot of stats during his time with the Dallas Cowboys. But I think that's where Tony Gonzalez separates himself to a degree too, for how long he played, and how successfully he played for as long as he did. But Travis Kelce, like I said, he's kind of that next iteration or version of the success that we saw with Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, at least as postseason statistical success, and then stat-wise, I think where he'll be when it's all said and done if he continues to play.
I think it's great the way the position has evolved, too. It used to be if you caught 45 passes as a tight end, they gave you a big applause and said, oh, he's a great pass catcher. Now, if you don't catch 90, you're having a so-so season. So.
Well, and go back to the point Amanda made in talking about the comparison to Kittle. Go look at the conference championship weekend. You have Sam Laporta, who's a hell of a rookie, had a phenomenal year. Mark Andrews comes back, but even when he was out, likely came in, and he was a big piece of it. You got Kelce, you got Kittle. Like, these offenses now, I think the best, typically find ways of getting mismatches and production out of their tight ends. It's a focal point. It's a key point now of offenses more than ever before.
And you mentioned Travis Kelce, 34 years old. If he does continue to play, we'll have to see how much longer.
The Chiefs have maybe the best tight end of all time in Travis Kelce. You guys both agreed that Patrick Mahomes, top 5 quarterback all time already. How about Andy Reid? And not just what he's done with Kansas City, but I mean, you go back to his days with the Eagles. Let's go back to 2001, and basically 50% of the time Andy Reid is coaching on Championship Sunday, either with the Eagles or with the Chiefs. 11 conference championship appearances. This is his 5th Super Bowl appearance. Pete, would he be in your top 5 right now, coaches all time?
No.
It's hard, man.
No, he's got work to do. He can get there.
How close is he?
He's close. There's no question he's close. He can get there. There's no doubt about it. Win this one, stay a coach, go attack that wins record for Don Shula, and he can get there. I mean, this is my top 5. And Bill Belichick, to me, is the greatest to have ever done it, just based on what he's done over the course of that dynasty and that span of years, and the way he did it different ways. Don Shula arguably should have won more Super Bowls. A lot of people would say that, but he's still a great coach. Chuck Noll, fantastic with the 4 Super Bowls. Bill Walsh, won his Super Bowls as well, won 4 of them. And then Joe Gibbs. People would argue with that one, I think. That one would be people would pick that one apart. The man won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks, and not one of them was a great quarterback. That tells you how good a coach he was.
You didn't have Tom Landry on the list. That's another name.
And that one was in there, too.
What about Vince Lombardi?
But we did it. We didn't.
Oh, since the merger, right?
Since the merger, okay.
Is that your list of 7 there?
Of 7?
I was just trying to count what you were writing.
No,
because Paul Brown would be on the list as well.
I was just going to say, people don't understand. If you go way back, I mean, Paul Brown was as dominant as a head coach as anyone.
50s Browns?
Yes. And so you include him in the conversation. But again, different eras that I think Pete points out Joe Gibbs. That's never been done. I don't know that we'll ever see that be done again. A head coach winning 3 Super Bowls with 3 separate quarterbacks. I mean, typically it's the head coach and the quarterback tied at the hip. There's only been so many who've been able to have success outside of that. So it's a great list. Again, a tough category though to throw Andy Reid into right now. They win next Sunday. I think he's definitely, making a case for himself, and we'll see how much longer he coaches. As I said before, he's 65, I think. I mean, he's at this pace with Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback. He could also be in striking distance of Don Shula's record if he wants to keep coaching that long, similar to a Belichick.
5 12-win seasons does it.
There you go.
That counts playoffs. So if he had had this season where he won 15 games in the regular season and won his playoff games and Super Bowl, then he's got 18. Then he doesn't need another 12 wins.
And maybe a little bit unfair because we're at 17 games now. And at some point, we might get to 18 games, so it gives a little bit more of an opportunity to get there because it's a regular season record. But
no, it's
it includes both.
It's both.
So we pick and choose now. Apparently, like the touchdown record was just a regular season record between Drew Brees and Tom Brady.
If he does get there, then. And obviously, if he got there, he'd win another couple of Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Then he could make a case of him being the best of all time.
Right.
So if he does get this one, 58, see, as you mentioned, Pete, he's 65. He'll be 66 in March. Where do you put Andy Reid? Does it jump significantly if he wins next Sunday?
I still think he's in that conversation with Landry and that group after the 5.
Bill Walsh and Gibbs. Gibbs was your 5th.
Yeah, and Gibbs is 5. I think he's in the group with Landry and right outside of the top 5 for me. And look, some people could make a case for Tom Landry being in the 5th instead of Joe Gibbs. I just think what he did with 3 quarterbacks is amazing. And so that's why I put him in there.
What's amazing is each one of these areas, as you look at what the responsibility of the head coach was, back before we had free agency, your draft picks you had to hit, and if they weren't ready right away, you had to develop them. A lot more coaching involved. Wasn't as much roster turnover. Nowadays, things are so much more about scheme and how do you put those players in to fit them, and how do you manage the roster through free agency and everything else. For some of these coaches, they wear multiple hats, right? They're a general manager, they're a head coach. They can do both. Some don't. Some would rather just coach. So I just think it's interesting that as you dissect this, it's really hard to compare because they all coach during eras where there was different challenges as a head coach. But nonetheless, all these guys are part of it.
Right. Like the Steelers had over their dynasty. I think yesterday I looked. They had 80 starters over the course. 80. That means guys stayed.
That might be 2 seasons, 3 seasons for an NFL team nowadays.
It's incredible. But they also had to deal with the fact that their guys had jobs in the offseason and came back to camp out of shape from not working out the entire offseason. It was in a different, like you said, there was different challenges in each era.
Yeah.
All right, we've got the Chiefs going for Super Bowl number 3 for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes up against the 49ers. They haven't won since Steve Young was the quarterback, that team with Deion Sanders back in the mid-90s. Sunday, a week from Sunday, our coverage begins at 6 o'clock Eastern Time on CBS and Paramount+.